The scent of pine and simmering mulled wine usually brought a comforting nostalgia, but this year it only sharpened the edges of the familiar tension. It was Christmas Eve, and the Henderson family gathering, annual and inescapable, was in full suffocating swing. My name is Maya, and like the worn leather armchair in the corner of my childhood living room, I was a fixture. Present, necessary for the overall scene, but never the centerpiece. That coveted role belonged, as it always had, to my older sister, Clara. Clara, with her effortless grace, her dazzling smile, and her life story, a narrative curated and edited by my mother, Eleanor, for maximum public admiration. Clara, the successful corporate lawyer, the one who married into old money, whose achievements were permanently etched in gilded frames throughout the house. I watched from the edge of the room as Eleanor, sleek and immaculate in her velvet dress, guided a group of extended family members towards the mantelpiece. She tapped a fingernail against a framed photo. Clara's promotion, darling. Vice President at 32. Can you believe it? Truly remarkable. The smiles and nods were instantaneous, well rehearsed. Then she spotted me. Her eyes paused, then flicked away, a micro-expression of polite dismissal I'd learned to read decades ago. She drifted over, her smile hardening into the one she reserved for minor obligations. Maya, darling, are you having a nice time? You know, your father and I were just discussing. Are you still enjoying the library work? It wasn't a question. It was a soft, strategic push back into the shadows. My job, preserving and digitizing rare manuscripts, was a quiet passion that gave me a deep, satisfying sense of purpose. But in my mother's hierarchy of values, it registered somewhere below professional dog walker. It's fulfilling, Mother, I replied, my voice calm. I actually just finished a 6-month project on the early 19 Textiontiao century botanical prints. It was quite a coup for the collection. Eleanor waved a dismissive hand. Yes, lovely, very quiet. But Kat, your father's cousin, was just asking about your love life. We told her you were focused on your career. Nothing serious on the horizon, I suppose? The bluntness of the question, delivered with a smile designed to convey concern but actually broadcasting pity, felt like a deliberate blow. And it was then, in that crowded, warm room, that I made a decision. I had been holding a secret, a profound, life-altering truth, for nearly 3 months. A truth that, if revealed on my terms, would shatter the careful facade my family had constructed. I set my glass of cider down, the quiet clink echoing louder in my own ears than the room's chatter. I'm married, Mother, I said. The air didn't just still, it cracked. It was the kind of silence that precedes a shockwave. Eleanor's practiced smile dissolved entirely, leaving a look of naked, genuine surprise, a look I'd rarely seen directed at me. What did you say? She breathed, leaning in. My father, who had been engrossed in a discussion about stock portfolios by the Christmas tree, immediately turned, his brow furrowed. Clara, across the room, stopped mid-sentence, her head tilted, analyzing. I repeated, maintaining eye contact. I'm married. I got married 3 months ago. You all received the announcement. My father stepped closer, his voice low, edged with confusion and a mounting anger. Maya, that's impossible. We never received an announcement. Why would you say that? I watched them. The 3 of them, my mother, my father, and Clara, the architects of my silent life, suddenly united in their denial. It was the same script they always fell back on: denial, confusion, and the silent agreement that whatever went wrong, I must be the source of the disruption. I mailed them myself, I stated, reaching for the small, structured clutch bag I'd brought. Certified mail, signature required. I wanted to make sure they didn't get misplaced. As I reached into the bag, every memory, every suppressed slight, every time I had been asked to dim my own light for Clara's brilliance, rose to the surface. It wasn't a story of mere sibling rivalry. It was a systemic imbalance, a family constitution that stated one child would be the sun and the other, the invisible, necessary moon. Growing up, our house was less a home and more a gallery. Every wall, every shelf was dedicated to proving the excellence of the Henderson lineage, and Clara was the living, breathing, gold star standard. Clara's life was a series of meticulously planned performances, the lead in every school play, the valedictorian speech, the acceptance into a top-tier law school. Eleanor didn't just support these achievements. She orchestrated them, micromanaging every detail from the lighting of the graduation photos to the font on Clara's law firm resume. My accomplishments were different, quieter. I excelled in languages, spent summers volunteering in historical preservation, and earned a scholarship to a university 3 states away. When I tried to share my college acceptance letter, Eleanor glanced at it briefly, then asked if I could move my display later, as the light was perfect for Clara's new headshots. The pattern was so consistent, so interwoven into the family's fabric, that I internalized it. I became an expert observer, a specialist in anticipating their needs and staying out of the way. I learned to find my joy outside the spotlight, in the quiet, dusty archives of history, where the stories of the overlooked often held the most profound weight. Leaving for university and then settling in a city an 8-hour drive away from my conservation work wasn't a choice. It was survival. The distance was my invisible shield, offering the emotional space to build a self that didn't require validation from the Henderson Gallery. It was there, in the quiet hum of my new life, that I met Leo. Leo wasn't a grand gesture of rebellion. He was a steady, grounding presence. A civil engineer who specialized in sustainable urban planning, he saw the value in what was built to last, not what was built for temporary flash. He noticed the small things, the precise way I organized my bookshelves, the quiet intensity when I spoke about a manuscript, the way I would look at a piece of historical architecture. His family, warm, chaotic, unapologetically working class, was a revelation. They didn't vet me. They welcomed me. Leo's mother, Maria, didn't ask about my career. She asked about my day. When she hugged me, it was a solid, lasting embrace, not the quick, self-conscious peck Eleanor offered. When Leo proposed on a quiet hike overlooking the city, his eyes full of certainty, I said yes, instantly. It felt like coming home for the first time. We didn't want a spectacle. We chose a simple, non-denominational chapel, a small reception in a botanical garden, and a guest list limited to the people who knew us, not the people we needed to impress. The decision to invite my immediate family was my last, stubborn gesture of hope. I designed the announcement card, a simple, elegant piece featuring an etching of a rare historical rose, and mailed it to them, requiring a signature upon delivery. I did this because I knew their habit of losing things that didn't fit their narrative. I checked the tracking obsessively. 4 packages, 4 signatures confirmed, all delivered to the family house. Then, the silence. Not a single congratulatory call, no text, not a passing comment in the family group chat. Weeks turned into months. The wedding happened, beautiful, real, and full of the love of people who chose to be there. And still, nothing. I spun the narrative endlessly. A postal error, a busy schedule, a misplaced stack of mail. But the truth, cold and sharp, began to solidify. Someone didn't want the invitation seen. The 3-month gap between my wedding and Christmas Eve had been a period of quiet grief and mounting clarity. The silence wasn't accidental. It was orchestrated. My attempts to reach out were met with predictable non-responses. A voicemail to my father asking if the mail had been received went unreturned. A text to Clara about a generic life update was politely deflected. Then, one evening, I noticed I had been removed from the family communication thread, the group chat used for everything from holiday logistics to simple check-ins. I hadn't been kicked out loudly, I was simply gone. I mentioned it to Leo while we were sitting in our quiet apartment, the scent of old paper and coffee filling the air. "They didn't even acknowledge the wedding announcement, Leo," I said, the casual tone I aimed for cracking mid-sentence. "And now the chat is gone." Leo, always pragmatic, didn't offer an excuse for them. He simply walked over to his laptop. "Show me the certified mail receipts, Maya. We need evidence." I pulled up the digital tracking logs, the dates, the destination address, and the final proof of delivery. But it was the signature that caught my breath. A distinctive, elaborate loop, a capital C that was unmistakable. Clara's. She hadn't just received the invitations. She had signed for 4 individual pieces of mail. 4 packages, with my name as the sender, delivered just weeks before her highly anticipated, massively produced vow renewal party, a spectacle she and her husband were throwing to celebrate their 10th anniversary. The timing, I realized, was not a coincidence. Clara had always been the gatekeeper of information, the one Eleanor trusted with scheduling, bill paying, and most importantly, deciding what information was worthy of the family's attention. My small, quiet wedding, with its genuine joy and lack of grandiosity, would have been an inconvenient distraction from her own upcoming meticulously planned extravaganza. Clara, the center of the universe, never tolerated a rival son. Leo saw the pain in my face. "What now, Maya?" "Now," I said, standing up, the quiet conviction a new feeling. "I go to the annual Christmas Eve gathering, and I bring the truth with me." The Christmas Eve dinner table was a monument to the Henderson aesthetic: sparkling crystal, an imported linen cloth, and a turkey that looked too perfect to eat. I sat across from Clara, who avoided my gaze with the practiced skill of a diplomat. Eleanor, at the head of the table, launched into the usual script: the praise for Clara's latest professional victory, the details of the children's elite school applications, and then the inevitable segue. Eleanor tapped her spoon against her water glass, the sound sharp and final. "Sister's vow renewal planning is going beautifully," she announced, looking at Clara with an admiring smile. "A destination event, truly magnificent. So Maya, darling," she shifted her attention to me, the smile turning pitying. "When is it going to be your turn? When will we get to see you walking down the aisle?" A few people chuckled. My father paused, carving the turkey. Clara looked down at her plate. Too still, too careful. I set my fork down, deliberately and gently. "I already did," I said, my voice steady, carrying over the hum of conversation. 3 months ago, in Seattle, you received the announcement card." The silence that followed was heavy and immediate. Eleanor's face went blank. My father slowly lowered the carving knife. "Maya, we never got them," my father whispered, the old familiar denial a reflex. "Why would you say we did?" "I figured you'd say that," I replied, the calm in my voice unnerving even myself. I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone, placing it face up next to my plate. The screen glowed, reflecting the candlelight. I tapped open the tracking log. "Certified mail, signed for upon delivery, 4 packages," I explained, rotating the phone slowly so everyone at the table could see the distinct looping signature on the screen. "Signed for by Clara Henderson." Eleanor gasped, a sharp, choked sound. My father leaned forward, squinting. Clara's husband, Julian, whose face usually held a permanent expression of passive approval, straightened, his eyes darting to his wife. Clara remained frozen, a magnificent, shattered statue. "These were delivered on September 15th, I continued, my voice measured, 2 weeks before the planning for Clara's vow renewal really kicked off. My father's face was a study in collapsing composure. "Clara, you signed for these?" Clara blinked slowly. I signed for a lot of mail. I don't recall 4 identical packages. It was probably a bulk delivery. I didn't see any invitation." "You didn't see 4 packages from your sister who had just announced her engagement?" I asked, not as an accusation, but as a simple, undeniable fact. "Packages sent with signature required because I knew the Henderson family tendency to misplace things that didn't center around Clara?" Clara bristled. "It's not my job to inventory your mail, Maya. Why are you always so dramatic?" "I'm not dramatic," I corrected. "I'm accurate." I swiped to the next screen, the final piece of evidence Leo had helped me retrieve. "This is the log from the family email account. The digital announcement I sent was opened from this house by a device linked to Clara's ID and immediately deleted." My father looked at Eleanor, a silent, desperate question in his eyes. Eleanor, finally recovering, rushed to the defense she'd employed my entire life. "Maya, stop! Why would Clara do this? It makes no sense. Why would she sabotage your wedding?" I looked straight at Clara, the silence of the room now a palpable pressure. "Why?" I repeated, echoing my mother's question. "Because my wedding happened, quietly, authentically, and it didn't compete with your spectacle. Because the spotlight, the narrative, and the attention must always belong to Clara." Clara shot to her feet, knocking her chair back. "That's a lie. You twist everything. You think you're so superior because you're quiet and martyr yourself for your little books. I just don't have time for this passive-aggressive nonsense." "Nonsense?" I asked. "You hid a profound, life-altering event from your parents because you felt threatened by a small wedding. That's not a logistical mistake, Clara. That's an act of emotional violence." My mother started to cry softly. "Oh, my dear, we would have been there. We wanted to be there." "Would you?" I challenged, turning my focus back to them. "Would you have rescheduled your meetings? Would you have canceled your standing appointments? Or would you have gone, put in the bare minimum attendance, and spent the entire reception planning Clara's next event? You didn't miss my wedding. You chose not to see it. And the only reason you're upset now is because you've been caught in the lie." My father sat down, looking suddenly ancient. "Maya, we did our best. We love you." "You did your best for Clara," I said, the words coming out not in anger, but in the finality of acceptance. "You managed her life like a precious commodity. For me, you asked me to wait on the sidelines, to be the quiet sister, to provide the necessary shadow for her light. You called that fairness. It wasn't." Clara sank back into her chair, her face a mask of defeat, the entitlement of decades finally stripped away. "You always make me feel guilty," she whispered, the true confession. "You never need anything. You just exist and make everyone else feel like they have to constantly perform." I stood up, the chair scraping softly against the polished floor. I wasn't shaking. I felt utterly, completely solid. "I didn't lose my family tonight," I said, looking from my mother to my father to Clara. "I simply stopped pretending I had one." I picked up my coat, feeling the weight of the lie lifting with every inch. As I walked towards the door, my father reached out a hand. "Don't go, Maya. It's Christmas. Let's fix this." I paused, my hand on the cold brass doorknob. "You can't fix what you refuse to acknowledge," I said softly. "And the truth is, you acknowledged Clara. You simply refused to acknowledge me." I stepped out into the cold night, the door closing behind me with a firm, irreversible click. The silence that followed was not the Henderson family's orchestrated denial. It was my own clean, self-claimed peace. Leo was parked down the street, waiting. He saw my face, saw the finality in my eyes, and didn't ask a single question. He simply reached across the console and took my hand, his grip warm and certain. "Let's go home," he said. Home. the place where my light was not a distraction, but a welcome reality. The next morning, the Hendersons tried to call. They tried to apologize in the language of damage control. But I knew the difference now, between the remorse of a parent caught in a mistake and the remorse of a parent who fundamentally refused to see the truth. I had the receipts, I had the witness, I had the courage. And for the first time, Maya, the quiet archivist, was the undisputed keeper of her own story.